Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is Jennifer Phillips Russo, and you are listening to Between the Vines. It is a podcast brought to you by Cornell University and Penn State University for the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program. I'm here with my guest co-host, Dr. Terry Bates, and we're continuing his talk about the past 25 years of research that have brought us to why we give certain recommendations in our region. Welcome back, Terry. Thanks for joining us again.
Hi, Jen. Hi, everybody. Love to be here.
I appreciate you being here. So what one are we talking about today?
All right. I'm going to go right into sharing my screen, although I know a lot of people are listening and not actually seeing my screen, which is like not good because I'm a very visual person. So we'll just talk your way through it. Okay, yeah, we're going through the top 10, what I consider my top 10 nutrition projects that have been run on Concord vines in Western New York over the many, many years. So the last one we talked about was the West Tier Factorial, which I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about today with respect to nitrogen. And since we're kind of behind and we need to get moving along, we're going to do two more. The next one, number 5. So West Tier was number 4. Number 5 would be nitrogen fertilizer efficiency studies that we did with Leilang Chang, who is a plant physiologist on the Ithaca campus with Cornell. And so we did some collaborative work in Fredonia on nitrogen fertilizer use efficiency. So that's number 5. And then number 6 is just more of a general nitrogen management, just based on some very grower related rates of nitrogen studies that we did and then came up with recommendations based on that.
And that's all today. Boy, you're going to
That's today. And we're going to go, I always say this, it's going to be quick. And then after an hour, it's not quick. Okay. Yes. So again, West Tier, Nelson Chalice, multifactorial experiment. So one of the factors that was in this trial was nitrogen management, 0, 50, or 100 pounds of actual nitrogen per year. So, and there was different floor management, different rootstocks, different training. So there's a lot that goes into this project. And as I always say, there is a relationship between pruning weight and yield, right? You can't get a big crop on a small vine. Right. You can screw up a big vine, but it's I know I sound like a broken record, and I know I always talk about Stan Howell, who is a Michigan State viticulturist, and they called him 3-pound Stan because he would continually go around talking to growers about, you want to grow at least 3 pounds of dormant cane pruning weight. You want to have a big vine. And then there's lots of things you can do, right? You can take advantage of a big crop. You can work on crop load management for ripening. You can divide your canopy if you want. But if you can't grow a 3-pound vine, you can't grow that leaf area, you're really restricted in what you can do, right? You're just trying to get the crop you can get off of that small vine. And when it comes to so I thought this was very visually illustrative. So sorry for those who are not watching the slides. So I'm going to quickly walk you through some of the treatments in the West Tier as with respect to nitrogen. So there were own-rooted Concord vines pruned to 30+10 balanced pruning or 60+10 balanced pruning. So for every pound of pruning weight, you're leaving more or less buds on that vine.
Thank you. I was going to ask you for our listeners to talk about what that is.
Yeah. So nowadays when we do balanced pruning, we do 20+20 pruning, or a simple way of saying is we leave 20 buds for every pound of pruning weight that we have. So if you have a 3-pound vine, you would leave 60 buds, which is not, most of our growers actually leave more than that.
I was going to say that's not what's indicative.
Yeah, with 60+10 pruning, you would leave 60 buds for the first pound of pruning weight and 10 buds for every additional pound. So if you had a 3-pound vine, it would be 60+10+10. So you'd leave 80 buds on a 3-pound vine. But okay, so what this first graphic is showing that when you have small vines, because they're own rooted, they have 0 nitrogen, and the cover in the row center was sod. So, right, you're out competing the vines and not giving them any nitrogen. You got these little small wimpy vines that are 1 to 1.5 pound vines, and your yield is low. So, I mean, even on here, the 60 plus 10 vines are running about 7 tons per acre. So we, we used to say in Fredonia, at the Fredonia lab, we would abuse our vines and still beat the belt average in yield. But you have to remember the west here it's just a 6 vine plot. And so you're using math to scale up how many pounds of fruit did I get off of these 6 vines and upscale that to tons per acre. So it's not realistic, because in a real vineyard you have a mix of pruning weights, you have missing vines, and that brings the average down. But I guess what it does show you is the potential.
Got it.
If I had a 2-pound vine, I could get 8 tons per acre if every vine in the vineyard was 2 pounds, which would lead to our variable rate management work. But I digress again. All right. So let's just say we cultivated those vines and the vine size jumps up about a half a pound of pruning weight just by cultivating the row centers, but still 0 nitrogen. So they're a little bigger, a little bit higher yielding, just by taking away some of the water.
Yeah.
All right. So now we add 50 pounds of nitrogen and we get a big bump. So 0 pounds of nitrogen, the vines are small. 50 pounds of nitrogen, the vines got a lot bigger and the yield got higher. So that, that's not
still cultivating, right?
Not, yeah, right. Not rocket science, as they say. It's viticulture. So yeah, I mean, it's the basics of vine physiology, right? They need water and they need nutrients to do photosynthesis to get bigger canopies and be able to support a larger crop. It's not that hard. So, okay, so you have this. Here's our relationship: 30 plus 10 vines, 60 plus 10, 50 pounds of nitrogen and cultivated, which is kind of the industry standard, I would say. And the next slide shows if we now add 100 pounds of nitrogen, we get no change between in pruning weight or yield. So, and all that's telling us is you gave them 50 pounds of nitrogen, so they were deficient or lacking in nitrogen, or they needed that extra bump in fertilizer. But going from 50 to 100 pounds did absolutely nothing other than waste money.
Money and then leach out into the environment.
Right. So that's where Nelson's recommendation always came, like they need 50 pounds of nitrogen. They don't need 100. And, I think the industry standard, especially back then, was you would do 100 pounds of actual nitrogen, whether you needed it or not, because they said it was cheap insurance. So that what that doesn't tell you is if 50 pounds gave you that maximum growth, like, do they really need 50 or do they need something less than 50? I mean, but again, as the price of fertilizer goes up, these questions become more important, right? When it's cheap insurance, you just buy it and spread it.
So I have a quick question. Does this take into account, and I know this might also be getting into the weeds, the organic matter that was already there?
We're gonna get to that, because that's kind of like the next. So this was all done at the Fredonia lab in the west here, which is a gravel loam soil with, I think, probably about 2 to 3% organic matter. And so we did stuff on different soils with different organic matter. So we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay, so there's our base, 50 pounds of nitrogen with cultivation. Okay, This is the one I always throw in here. So when Nelson grafted Concord to 3309 rootstock and had 0 pounds of nitrogen, and I think I have cultivation in there, but I probably could even do have sod growing in the row center.
Okay.
And the vines are bigger, so we're talking 4 to 5 pound vines here, and 12 tons per acre on 60 plus 10 pruned.
Well, so, now that's on gravel soil. So
so that's the Shenango gravel loam, 3309, no nitrogen. The vines are big and they're yielding high because that root system is deeper and more aggressive and will pick up water and nutrients and water and nitrogen. And so you don't need supplemental nitrogen. And you got vines that are too big, right? A 5 pound vine is a monster. And That's what sparked the whole GDC discussion. Oh my gosh, I have 5-pound vines, meaning I have so much canopy, it overfills the trellis space. And now what am I going to do with it? I can separate that and intercept more sunlight per unit land area and have that acre of grapes be more productive. So, okay. The bottom line is in our own rooted Concord vines, the research is saying they needed about a mature Concord vine own rooted needed about 50 pounds of nitrogen, and that was it. Like, you didn't need any more, and you should probably turn your attention to other nutrients like potassium after that.
And putting on that 100, just to reiterate to everybody listening, did nothing more than what that 50 pounds per nitrogen did.
Right. Okay, so another trial. So this was, we called the Betts nitrogen trial. It was started by Phil Throop, who was your predecessor, like 4 times removed. Started working with Bob Betts on different levels of nitrogen. So 0, 50, and 100 pounds of nitrogen. So just like the West here, but this was on a heavier, more of a clay loam soil type. So higher organic matter, higher water holding capacity. Maybe a problem with drainage. So a lot of common in our area. You go from a Shenango gravel loam that's well drained to excessively well drained to like a Niagara type soil, which is a clay loam, has great nutrient holding capacity, great water holding capacity, but can have too much water, can have a high water table, and the grapes don't like wet feet. And then it's more of an issue of rooting volume at that point. So anyways, so we ran this for what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So this is actually I took it over after Phil left
Wow.
for another position, and we just tracked yield, and there's like, okay, essentially no difference. I mean, there is a little difference like every other year where you have the higher rates of nitrogen. So 50 would be better than 0, but 100 is not better than 50. So again, same lesson. Give them a little bit of nitrogen because they need it, but giving them excessive nitrogen, it's cheap insurance, but it's not cheap insurance anymore because the price of fertilizer has gone up. And we're getting into all the awareness about environmental safety, not excessively applying synthetic fertilizers to, basically screw up the biology of the soil.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yes. And okay, so if you look at the cumulative, so this is the 7-year cumulative yield in that trial. And like there's between 0 and 50 is like there's hardly any bump at all. Because yeah, and then from 50 to 100 there's no bump. And the point is, you asked the question about organic matter. So we went from the West here, which was a lower organic matter soil, to the Betts trial, which was a higher organic. And you're getting so many pounds of nitrogen from mineralization of that organic matter that the supplemental, I always say this, nitrogen fertilizer is supplemental at best, right? Most of what you're getting is from the mineralization of nitrogen in the soil. And then you're just giving it an extra shot of nitrogen when the vines need it most, when they're growing the fastest during the middle of the growing season.
So this has a good diet. To go back to previous ones that we have done, previous podcasts, the Betts had the organic matter, which is its diet for the grapevine.
Yes.
It needed less supplemental vitamins.
Right. Okay, so we talked about the big dig and the little dig, where we dug up vines and knowing when the vine was growing, when the demand for nitrogen was during the season. So that led to us doing work with Lei Lang Chang. So now we used non-radioactive isotopes of nitrogen laced fertilizer. So
I love this.
Yeah, so we could tell how much nitrogen the vine was taking up and at what time of year, and how much of that nitrogen was derived from the fertilizer. That's the NDFF, nitrogen derived from fertilizer. And so what we found in mature Concord vines, right? So a mature Concord vine, middle of the season, like say right around veraison time. So it's like the maximum capacity of that vine. The vines needed 80 grams per vine, or roughly 106 pounds of nitrogen per acre. But that doesn't take into account the annual, like there's already some nitrogen in the vine stored in its perennial structures. So when we looked at what it was using on an annual basis, like an annual growth cycle, it was about half of that, 40 grams per vine, or roughly 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Right. So that makes sense. Oh, hey, I apply 50 pounds of fertilizer to get that 50 pounds, but it doesn't actually work that way because the efficiency with the fertilizer uptake is a lot lower than that makes sense if it's 100% efficient, right?
Right.
The vines need 50 pounds. I put on 50 pounds. They take up 50 pounds. The world is happy, but it doesn't work that way. So at different times of the year, it's taking up the nitrogen derived from the fertilizer at different rates, depending on how the roots are growing and if the soil is moist enough to, aid in the movement of nitrogen to the roots and biological activity so that we can take up nitrogen. So let's see, what do we say? 50 pounds per acre of nitrogen was added, 24% fertilizer efficiency, at its best. So
And
what
that
that's
was
saying.
tracked. I'm sorry, that was tracked because you could watch it because of the isotope that you applied.
Yes. So what that's saying is if you put on 100 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer, you would get 25 pounds into the vine, right? It was only where it happened to the other 75 pounds, right?
Right.
It either leached or it got taken up by microorganisms, and incorporated into organic matter of some way. But again, what you're putting on is supplemental because you're going to put stuff on and it's only about a quarter of it's actually making it to the vines. And then there's been other research with grapes on the West Coast looking at how that efficiency changes with the amount of nitrogen. So if the vine is actually low in nitrogen, or you're in a low nitrogen status and you put on fertilizer, it takes it up at a higher efficiency. But if you're in a situation where you have say high organic matter and a high nitrogen status situation and you put on fertilizer, it's actually less efficient, which actually makes a lot of sense. If I'm starving, I'm going to eat very efficiently. And if I'm not starving, I'm going to be I'll pass this one up.
Yeah.
Right? The roots aren't developing a mechanism. So there are proteins in the membranes of roots and they get upregulated or downregulated depending on their environmental situation. So if you're starving for nitrogen, you're going to upregulate how I'm going to get nitrogen. And if you're got sufficient nitrogen, you're not going to waste the energy. You're going to downregulate those things that help you get more nitrogen. So we didn't do any of that work. That was done in other studies. But okay. So if the vine needs 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre, fertilizer is delivering 12 pounds per acre, right? Then you need 38 more pounds, right? It's where is that coming from? It's coming from the organic matter. So I always show this slide because it kind of is the basis of our recommendations.
Go back, I'm sorry, to tell the numbers that you were saying for our listeners who might not be doing quick math in their head. That 12 pounds that he's talking about is actually the 25% of 50 pounds applied.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So we're looking at efficiency of, so this is a better graphic that we're going to try to explain to our listeners. So I have a chart and there's a blue line that shows the total amount of nitrogen that's in the vine that's being uptake into the vine. And then the red line is the nitrogen from fertilizer. So what you should see is, the vine's taking up a lot of nitrogen, and then the nitrogen it's actually getting from fertilizer is very little, but it can be very critical. And I don't want to make it sound don't apply nitrogen fertilizer. That's not true at all, because there are times of the year that the mineralization that's coming from organic matter it's not fast enough to keep up with the rate of growth of the vine. And that's when you need the fertilizer. And that is why our recommendation, growers used to put on nitrogen fertilizer pre-bud break.
And in the fall.
Yes. And that is that we don't feel like that is the best time to do it.
Because
it's so say you're putting on in the, late in the fall or early in the spring, so that nitrogen fertilizer, it sits there, it leaches through the soil profile, or it gets tied up in organic matter. It's not available to the vine. Plus, from our big dig and little dig studies, we know that the vine is mostly working off of nutrient reserves in the perennial structures early in the season and actually not taking up very much nitrogen.
From the spring.
Then we follow that up with the work from Lei Lang Chang, which is, nitrogen derived from the fertilizer based on this isotope study we did. And it's showing we're getting very little fertilizer nitrogen uptake early in the season. Yes.
However, what it is showing when I'm looking at this graph, for those of you who are listening, is that the blue line of the total nitrogen that the vine needs absolutely spikes at a high rate from bloom to veraison. And the same with the nitrogen that was applied. That's when the increase happens.
Right. So you're essentially you're tracking the vine converts over from working off of reserves, right? It used its reserves to build new roots and build new shoots. And
Right.
now around bloom time, it's saying, okay, now you have to rely, you built this engine. Now you have to rely on the engine to take up more nutrients and intercept sunlight. And so that's why you get this higher efficiency of fertilizer uptake at that time, which is why we recommend that you put down your nitrogen fertilizer closer to bloom. And
There when the roots need it, when the roots are actively looking for it.
yes. So the caveat is you need good soil moisture at that time too, or the whole thing falls apart. I get this question all the time, so I wanted to talk about it. Okay, we talked about this stuff about peak demand. Okay.
Wow.
Sciencey slide. People are going to love
for those
this.
Listening.
Yes, a sciencey slide. So this is talking about nitrogen sources for the plant in the soil. So if you're going to make synthetic fertilizers, right? So it's using ammonia, and you have to use heat and pressure. So that's why if the cost of fuel goes up, the cost of your fertilizer goes up, because you need that fuel to make the fertilizer. So to make ammonium nitrate and to make urea, you need heat and pressure, thing called the Haber process. To make that fertilizer, which is then eventually through biological activity in the soil is going to turn into ammonium and nitrate, which can be taken up by the vine. So if you put on ammonium nitrate fertilizer, that's like a salt. And as soon as it gets into the soil profile, it gets into the soil moisture. So that's why if it's super dry and you put ammonium nitrate down, it's going to sit there. It's like a salt. I mean, like if you put table salt on your table, it's going to sit there like salt. And then you pour some water on it, and then it dissolves into sodium and chloride. Same thing with ammonium nitrate. It just needs to get into the soil moisture. And even a dew helps it do that, right? So it'll separate into ammonium and nitrate. Plants prefer to take up nitrate. It's like the most readily available form for it to take up. But the ammonium it will take up some ammonium, but in lesser amounts. And the ammonium can get converted to nitrate in the soil, which it'll then take it up. The other way to get at this is that ammonia, through biological activity, gets into the organic portion of the soil, right? So then you have your organic matter that's mineralizing and turning, you're getting your sources of ammonium and nitrate. Eventually that will be taken up. And that's just a slow process. Mm-hmm. So you're balancing these two. One's a supplemental fertilizer, it's very fast. One is a biological form of nitrogen, and it's very slow, and you just need to supplement the two together to deal with what you are gonna for taking up the vine. Okay, so if our recommendation is don't apply pre-bloom, apply or pre-bud break like they used to do it. So it used to be, I'm going to apply 200 pounds of actual nitrogen at pre-bud break. And we're like, that's way inefficient. Yeah. Based on all this information we have now. So it's like, okay, reduce your nitrogen levels, tailor it to your soil organic matter. So the higher the soil organic matter, the less nitrogen you probably need to apply to supplement. Do it closer to bloom. And then I always get the question, what about volatilization of nitrogen. So this comes from like the Midwest and West where it's hot and dry all the time. And if you put down nitrogen fertilizer when it's hot and dry and windy, you'll actually lose a lot of that nitrogen to volatilization,
To the atmosphere.
to the atmosphere.
It's gonna off gas.
Yes, yes. So, so I took a look at what are the conditions that lead to volatilization and what are the conditions that go against volatilization. So if you have, so ammonium is not volatile. If it turns to ammonia, it is volatile. And what drives that reaction is high soil pH. So, okay, what keeps things in ammonia? So not volatile, ammonia. That's what you want to get into your soil, which is going to turn to ammonium and nitrate, and the plant's going to take it up. So what favors that? Acid soils, heavy rain, if it's cool, still, and if you use cultivation, that gets it into the soil. So as soon as your nitrogen fertilizer actually makes it into the soil, and then say the soil dries down and it off gases, that's okay because it actually just absorbs back onto other soil particles. It's the real danger is when it's just sitting there on top of the soil and then it can volatilize. So cultivation actually helps limit the amount of volatilization. So in our New York vineyards, we tend to favor this non-volatile situation, right? We have acid soils. We tend to get pretty good rains. This year it turned dry at the wrong time. We do have some heavier soils compared to like some real sandy soils in the West. It's cool. And sometimes we use cultivation. And the things that favor volatilization are neutral soils. So if you're, say, in Niagara County and your soil pH is 7 or above, well, that'll favor volatilization. So maybe that's something you want to consider. Light sandy soils, dry conditions. Now I'm talking dry conditions like Eastern Washington, not dry. Yeah. Hot. We don't, relatively speaking, we don't live in a hot climate. Like we're talking hot, like it should be over 90 degrees, which is rare for our lakeshore vineyards. It does get windy around here, and no-till. More people are using no-till. So I stand by the recommendation that you want to put your nitrogen fertilizer down, say, in the 2-week prior to bloom period, like 2 weeks pre, 2 weeks post bloom. That window when you're out there also spraying is a good time to put it down, but you want to also put it down when you're going to get some rain in the forecast. Like if it's like this year, right about the time we wanted it would be the optimum time to put down nitrogen fertilizer, it got dry. And Dan here at the lab, he waited, and then when we had rain in the forecast, he put it down and it rained on it, and then the vines respond really well the next week because it was the shot they needed at the right time.
I would like to back up just a little bit because I don't think that we've mentioned it yet in this podcast, and that is the amount of nitrogen that you get from organic matter when you're factoring into how much of a vitamin or supplement fertilizer.
Yeah. Okay. So in our soils, and this will change depending on like where you are in the United States, but rule of thumb for us is that you get 20 pounds of nitrogen per % organic matter. So.
And that's the type that they like to take up. That is in the.
Yeah. And it's just that it's slow release. Mm-hmm. And so most of our, okay, so this is a distribution. So vineyards in our region, what is their % organic matter? So most of our vineyards are in this 3 to 4% organic matter range. So if you think about it, if you have 4% organic matter, that's 80 pounds of nitrogen equivalent that you're getting every year, which is more than what the vines actually need, mature Concord vines. It's more than what they need. So like in those cases, like you shouldn't have to put on any nitrogen fertilizer at all. But the reality is it's that organic matter is just not fast enough release during the peak demand times during rapid shoot growth and fruit set whatever fruit development. So from bloom to say 30, 40 days after bloom, when you're going from, at bloom, we have about 40 to 50% of our canopy. 30 days after bloom, we have 100% of our canopy. Kind of the same thing with the crop. So it's really high demand from that bloom to 30, 40 days after bloom. You're trying to finish building your canopy and building your crop. And that's when you need the nitrogen. And if you have 3 to 4% organic matter, you're getting enough nitrogen. You just need a little shot just to get it. Yeah, so that it's faster release. You can keep up with the demand of the vine. And I should also reiterate that it's the demand of the vine in a highly managed system, right? So if we go back to, hey, we have a grapevine that's growing up a tree in the forest, and it's dealing with a forest situation with fairly high organic matter, and it's growing up a tree. Yeah, it doesn't need any fertilizer. I mean, it's adapted to that climate where it's probably matching its growth with the amount of nitrogen it's getting from the forest floor. But we are growing our grapevines in a very, very highly managed, high production system. We're pushing these vines like athletes,
right.
And so we have to at that right time of the year when we want our athletes sprinting, we need to give them a little extra vitamins to keep them going at peak performance.
I was going to make a joke there, but I was like, nope, don't. Somebody's going to come back and say, Jennifer.
No steroids.
No.
Those are called growth regulators. So, okay, I think we've exhausted this.
Yes.
So
basically, the timing to put on your fertilizer 2 weeks before up to 4 weeks after bloom. And really, it should be just those 4 weeks, 2 before and 2 after.
Yes. If you want to be super efficient, split application but not a lot of people do that. So around here, if you're in a situation where you're irrigating, which again, not a lot of vineyards around here, you can fertigate and you can split your applications of nitrogen. You can do multiple applications of, small doses of nitrogen during that rapid growth period.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add about your nitrogen? Because I know that we're getting ready to sort of wrap up this part of the nutrient study and move on to
we need to move on to other nutrients other than nitrogen. But
right.
I think the bottom line is, when I started working here, growers, I think the general practice was 100 pounds of actual nitrogen, whether you needed it or not, and you did it pre-bud break. And all we're trying to do is be a little bit more efficient. So apply less nitrogen fertilizer, base that on your percent organic matter, do it closer to the period of the season where the vines are rapidly growing. I think just kind of put those concepts together to tailor your nitrogen applications. And the next step is to put all that together in a spatial measurement of your vineyard. So different soil types with different organic matter and different vine growth rates. If you have spatial maps to do that, you can tailor your variable rate nitrogen application to it. But that's kind of the next step.
And I was going to add, and in order to know what those numbers are, you really should advocate for a soil and a tissue sample so that you aren't just guessing at what you have out there.
You're going to get a lot of phone calls now. You just raised a controversial issue. What's better, soil samples, tissue samples? When do you take those tissue samples? And there's active research going on right now to answer some of those questions. And I'm even changing my mind on some of these things, but I'm waiting for the data to come. I'm waiting for all the data to come in before I make a decision on that.
Very interesting. So we look forward to this podcast. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope that you all found this exciting and interesting and you learned something from it. If you have future questions or anything in regards to what we talked about today, please feel free to leave a comment below if you're watching it on YouTube, or email. And you can find our email addresses online. It's Dr. Terry Bates or Jennifer Phillips Russo. And I'd prefer you actually email me, and then I will funnel them to Terry because he is very busy with a lot of different things. So, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us for our listeners. And with
I will
this,
say one more thing, shameless plug
yeah,
for other podcasts. So the High Res Vineyard Nutrition has a podcast series, and that if anyone's looking for more things to listen to, that's a great one. I just got my hat from Fritz Westover for the Vineyard
yeah,
Underground podcast. So shameless plug for Fritz Westover, who has a podcast series that is he's down in Texas, Georgia area. But it is, tailored towards Eastern viticulture, which is
PSU and Cornell grad. So
yes, yep. There's lots of podcast type stuff out there, like the Penn State series, your series. So there's plenty of things to listen to out there.
yeah. And thank you for those plugs for that.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell what the high res one is, just in case people don't know, because it's a different sort of acronym?
Oh, the High Res Vineyard Nutrient Management, I think, is the official title. So that's the USDA project that it cuts across the United States, where we're trying to develop sensors that tell us what the nutrient status of the vine is. And so we can get spatial maps of vine nutrient status and apply variable rate fertilizer applications from that. So Patty Skinkis from Oregon State University is a person who produces those podcasts, and it's an excellent series.
Yeah, a great resource.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for joining us, and hopefully we will see you next week. I know things are getting really busy out there, so if not, it'll be shortly thereafter. Have a great week, everyone.